The upcoming section is a little bit long. It's about 12 minutes. But if you're in the mood and you got 12 minutes, it may be worth your while sticking around and watching it all the way to the end. Today, we're going to talk about a deep subject. We're going to talk about, can you pray for my cells? I had a very interesting request by even a more interesting patient when she asked me to pray for her cells. And I thought for a moment that was an interesting request. And I thought, is this really the best thing to do? Because if I prayed for them and I really didn't have faith that it would help, I think that would be dishonest to her. On the other hand, I thought, well, what's the harm? And is there actually some proof that this can be beneficial for a patient? Because if it is, there's really not a lot of side effects to it, and it should help them. So I started to dig into this. Is this possible? Is there a relationship between prayer and cells? And of course, there's always conflicting evidence, but when you look at all this evidence and you really dig into it, there seems to be like three basic principles that we could look at to see if this is really worth doing for patients. And it came down to this, that humans are a complex relationship between your body, your mind, and your soul. And when this complex relationship is disrupted in some way, we have disease. And that thirdly, that prayer can help restore this intimate balance between mind, body, and soul. So let's give you an example about how these interact. Say I was somebody who wanted to build a boat. So to be able to build a boat, first of all, I have to use my body. I have to go ahead and collect some wood. I got to be able to shape that wood. I got to be able to hammer things. I got to be able to paint things. So I have to use my body to be able to build that boat. I also have to use my mind, because if I have all these pieces of wood and I don't know how to put them together, it's not going to end up like a boat. It may end up like a whole bunch of flat pieces of wood together that are tied together and the boat doesn't sail or it sinks. So I had to use my mind to go ahead and have the plan for the boat, how the sail will go ahead and be integrated into the boat, how I will shape the wood, and the steps that I need to go in the right order to go ahead and design this boat. And then you might say, well, then how does the soul fit into this? So now I have my boat. What am I going to do with this boat? If I'm going to use the boat as a merchant and I bring food to my village, well, I'm a pretty good guy. But if I use that boat to go ahead and pillage my village, I'm called a pirate. So you have to have the right use of what you're going to build with your body and your mind. And then to go ahead and think about, like, what happens when one of these go awry. So if you go ahead and have a broken bone, for example, that's a problem with your body. And when that happens, you usually go to a physician and they help you out. If you have a problem with your mind, then you usually go to a psychiatrist or a counselor, and they can help you out. And when you have a problem with your soul where you've made some bad decisions, well, again, you can go back to a counselor, or when you've made some really bad decisions, you're ordered by the court to end up in a prison system. So we as humans too really realize that there is something wrong with somebody when that balance isn't together. Again, for example, somebody who's on a ventilator that their body can't even breathe for them, we don't even call them a human. We call them a vegetable. when somebody has lost their marbles, for example, and they have a lot of delusions, we call them insane. And when somebody does something so vicious that we can't even imagine what that is to another human being, we call them a monster. And in fictional characters, we've taken those monsters and we've perpetuated them with things like a vampire, because a vampire doesn't have a soul, or a zombie doesn't have a soul. So we know inherently that there's this nice finite balance between the three. And when there's imbalance, there's disease. So finally, what we need to do is to show that that relationship, when restored, leads to health. So Socrates knew this. Plato knew this back around the 3rd century BC. But when we got around the Age of Enlightenment, certain philosophers such as Felix Adler and Stewart had a thought that, well, we don't need that soul part. We just need that mind-body part. And then that was picked up as a mind-body relationship. And just as in the 1980s and 1990s with people like Deepak Chopra, where this mind-body relationship became very, very popular. That is, all you had to do was think good thoughts and you could get better. So even Harvard went ahead and developed a Mind-Body Institute. And they had their famous study called the Study of Therapeutic Effects of Intercessory Prayer, where they went ahead and had non-intentional prayer for patients undergoing cardiac surgery that really didn't ask for the prayer. And there they failed to show a relationship between prayer and outcome. And even the famous Cochrane group, that is a large database which helps physicians throughout the world develop protocols on how to treat hypertension or asthma or heart disease such as high cholesterol. That group itself used this comment in 2009. We are not convinced that further trials of this intervention should be undertaken and would prefer to see any resources available for such trial used to investigate other questions in healthcare. And that's kind of a polite way of saying, look, we're done looking at this, move on. The problem is that they left one of the 3 components out, that they were just looking for a relationship between mind and body and not mind, body, and soul. So this violated a principle that we used for well over 2,000 years, about 2,300 years, that they decided that they wanted to change at this point. So when we look at that, when we start to look at when there's a restoration between those 3 components, well, the outcomes change. And the outcomes are usually positive in that situation. So how do we know this is true? By truths that are, quote, self-evident. So what does that mean? Our forefathers used that all the time about self-evident truths, because they would look at nature, they would look at human nature itself and say, this is self-evident. It is so true that you really don't need proof for it. It is there in nature. It is there right in front of you. It is self-evident. So, for example, we have in the Catholic Church the Communion of Saints. So this is over 10,000 people that are in this Communion of Saints. And most, but not all, got there through a very rigorous evaluation of their lives and of their intercession into other people's lives. And that's what we call a miracle. And the miracle has very strict guidelines of how they determine it's actually a miracle, because you can't explain it any other way other than there was some type of divine intervention that restored their mind, body, and soul together. So there was one here in Detroit, where we're from, And this guy right here, Father Solanus Casey. In 2012, there was a lady by the name of Paula Medina Zarate. And she had a genetic condition that was called ichthyosis, a skin disease. And she went on September 12, 2012, and she went to his grave and prayed for his intercession to heal her. Well, she had a spontaneous, complete reversal of a genetic disease that could not be explained any other way. And this is modern medicine in 2012. This is not something from the 1700s where we just didn't have the tools to further evaluate this. This is modern medicine that looked at this and said, the truths are so self-evident in this that this has to be a miracle. And thus, he is known as Father Solanus Casey, the miracle worker, because of just one of these. And this is just one of the 10,000. So it isn't just one isolated case. There's over 10,000 cases like this. So understanding that, there's some basic principles that we have to do is where we have to ask for that healing. We have to participate in that healing. And we also have to realize, too, that there's one big trump card. And that one big trump card is God's plan. So even though we may ask for something, that doesn't always mean that we receive that, because there's a grander plan that God has. And that kind of seems like a cop-out type of non-disclosure statement of results may vary, but results do vary because we can't understand the big, huge picture. So, in summary, I think it's a good idea that I prayed for this patient and her cells because there's no side effects to it. There's no charge for it. And usually, good things come from that. So remember, these are your cells for your healing. If you want to learn more about using your own cells to heal yourself, go ahead and call us at 810-299-8552. That's 810-299-8552. Talk to Kim or visit us on our website at cellularhealing.net. Remember, these are your cells for your healing.